Page 41. The History of Human Marriage by Edward Westermarck, 1891. In 3 volumes, Volume 1. 0.4. Marriage is rooted in instincts. An error of method which was very prevalent among the evolutionary school in those days when the first edition of this work was written, and which is still committed by certain writers, is the practice of inferring, without sufficient reason, from the prevalence of a custom or institution among some savage peoples, or from facts interpreted as survivals of it, that this custom or institution is a relic from a stage of development which the whole human race once went through. Thus, the assumption that primitive men lived in tribes or hordes, all the men of which had promiscuous intercourse with all the women, where no individual marriage existed, and the children were the common property of the tribe, is founded, in the first place, on the statements of some travelers and ancient writers as to peoples among whom this custom is said actually to prevail, or to have prevailed, and, in the second place, on certain supposed survivals of that custom. Dr. Post went still further in his book Die Geschlechtsgenossenschaft der Urzeit und die Entstehung der Ehe. Without adducing any satisfactory reason for his opinion, he considered it probable that monogamous marriage originally emerged everywhere from pure communism in women, through the intermediate stages of limited communism in women, polyandry, and polygyny, but he subsequently revised his views. Lewis H. Morgan, in his systems of consanguinity and affinity of the human family, suggested no fewer than 15 normal stages in the evolution of marriage and the family, assuming the existence and general prevalence of a series of customs and institutions which must of necessity have preceded a knowledge of marriage between single pairs, and of the family itself, in the modern sense of the term. Marriage by capture has been regarded as the primitive and once universal method of acquiring a wife, and to this day we hear of an early stage of group marriage and of a stage of mother right preceding father right. Now, it seems obvious that we have no right to assume the universal prevalence of a social phenomenon in the past unless we may assume that the cause or causes to which it is due have been universally operating. If speculating on such problems, we have therefore first to find out the causes of the social phenomena, then, from the prevalence of the causes, we may infer the prevalence of the phenomena themselves, if the former may be assumed to have operated without being checked by other causes. In this way we may conclude with absolute certainty that there were always intimate relations between a mother and her young child, since the causes of these relations must always have operated in a mammalian species, like man. A similar way of reasoning has also led me to the hypothesis that the family, consisting of father, mother, and children, existed already in primeval times and probably among our pre-human ancestors, owing to the offspring's need of care and protection and to the economic obstacles in the way of a permanent living in hordes. But this conclusion has a less solid foundation than the former one, because the necessity of paternal care is not so certain as that of maternal care. On the other hand, the causes, or hypothetical causes, to which marriage by capture, group marriage, and mother right may be traced are not such as to justify the belief in the universal prevalence of any of these customs at any stage of human civilization, to say nothing of promiscuity, the existence of which as the exclusive form of the relations between the sexes even among a single people is extremely doubtful. The comparative method and the manner in which it has been applied are thus by no means above criticism. But the defects from which it suffers, and the errors to which it has led, hardly justify the air of superiority with which it has not infrequently been treated by the advocates of other methods. Its weaknesses and pitfalls are easy to detect, because it has been applied on a large scale in the course of half a century, but I also think that the many important results achieved through it bear ample testimony to its merits. In order to form a just appreciation of a method it must be sufficiently put to the test, and this cannot be said to have been the case either with the sociological method of the French school or the ethnological method, which as yet have been in a greater degree subjects of theoretical discussion than of practical application. As for the French method, I cannot help saying that there are disquieting signs of a tendency to expansion beyond its legitimate limits. its followers have not always been satisfied with restricting their conclusions to social phenomena belonging to the same area, but have regarded their method as a direct means of arriving at results of a much wider scope. Thus Professor Durkheim, in his book on the totemic system in Australia with the significant title Les formes et copyright mentaires de la vie religieuse, confidently asserts that this system contains all the great ideas and all the principal ritual attitudes which are at the bottom even of the most advanced religions, and he then proceeds to a discussion of religion in general, in the belief that if you have carefully studied the religion of one people only, you are better able to lay down the main principles of their religious life than if you followed the comparative method of a Tyler or Fraser. A superscript 1. It almost seems as though some kind of sociological intuition were to take the place of comparative induction. When properly applied, however, the different methods have their special problems to solve, and this should exclude every rivalry between them. All of them are beset with difficulties, for the problems are often complicated, and the material at our disposal is defective. With reference to the particular subject matter of the present work, it should be added that the investigator often must go beyond the psychological causes of the phenomena with which he deals and try to find their biological foundation. Marriage, so far as I can see, is rooted in instincts which can only be explained by biological facts either peculiar to mankind and its nearest relatives, or of a more general character, and so are many particular customs and rules relating to marriage. Such instincts have been formed in accordance with the need of the species, which again depends upon anatomical and physiological factors of various kinds. This is true both of the sexual instinct with its peculiarities and of other instincts by which marriage is determined. It was a great defect of the earlier treatises on marriage that the biological aspect of the problem was entirely ignored, and even now it is not sufficiently recognized. In a review of the first edition of this work, Tyler pointed out that its distinguishing character was its effort to work the biology side and the culture side of anthropology into one connected system, and he added that there can be no doubt of the value of the resulting discussions, which will develop further as the inquiry goes on in this direction. In the present edition, discussions of this kind occupy an even more prominent place than before. There is no question here of biological analogies applied to the explanation of social evolution, as has been mistakenly said, but we are concerned with biological facts underlying psychical and social phenomena. At the same time, careful attention must also be given to the influence which people's ideas and beliefs have exercised upon their marriage customs, a subject on which much light has been thrown in the course of the last 20 years. And another factor of importance is the influence of industrial culture. Marriage is not a mere sex relation, but an economic institution as well, and is consequently more or less influenced by the sources of subsistence. I do not propose to discuss marriage in all its aspects, but shall, in the main, restrict myself to the following subjects: the origin of marriage and questions connected with it, such as sexual periodicity, the various groups of facts which have been regarded as evidence of primitive promiscuity, alleged instances of peoples living in promiscuity, prenuptial unchastity, the Jew primi noctis, religious prostitution, the lending and exchange of wives, feasts at which promiscuous intercourse is indulged in, the classificatory system of relationship, mother right, and masculine jealousy, the frequency of marriage and the marriage age, celibacy, sexual modesty, which has a bearing both on celibacy and on some marriage customs, courtship and its various features, primitive means of attraction, sexual selection as influenced both by preferences and aversions, in the endogamous and exogamous rules which are rooted in the latter, the methods of contracting a marriage, such as capture, consent, and the giving of a consideration for the wife either in the form of the exchange of bride for bride, or of service, or of true purchase, or of gifts, or of the exchange of presents, the marriage portion, marriage rights, monogamy, polygyny, polyandry, and group marriage and other group relations, the duration of marriage and the rules relating to its dissolution. I shall discuss each of these questions separately, and in doing so I shall consider the customs or laws of peoples at all stages of civilization. I shall not, however, enter into all the details of the marriage laws of modern civilized peoples, which are of comparatively little theoretical interest and, besides, can easily be found in legal treatises. Whenever it is possible, I shall group together peoples of the same stock or living in the same area, but in other cases I shall not hesitate to mention even in the same paragraph peoples belonging to different races, living far away from each other, and standing on different levels of culture, but whose customs or beliefs invite comparison. This will in certain quarters be called bad method, but I beg to refer to Darwin and others who, in dealing with some particular biological phenomenon, speak in the same breath even of different species of animals, and nevertheless have succeeded in reaching conclusions of some importance. When the subject allows it, I shall make it a rule first to give a descriptive account of the phenomenon I am discussing, as it occurs among different peoples, and afterwards try to find its cause or causes, whether biological, psychological, or sociological. I am, of course, fully aware that the explanation may be incomplete, that it may refer to some cases but not to all, and that it may be partly or wholly conjectural. If I do not discuss the question of a common origin, either through the people's descent from the same ancestors or through culture contact, that must by no means be interpreted as an assumption on my part that there is no common origin. When I speak of phenomena which I regard as specific characters such as the sexual instinct, masculine jealousy, female coyness, or the family, I assume, on the contrary, eo ipso that they have a common source, and when I speak, for example, of identical marriage rights among the peoples of the Indo-European group, I never think of independent origins in each case. But to seek for the homestead of the various marriage customs would in most cases be a most unprofitable task. The method I am following often necessitates long enumerations of facts. These are not meant merely to illustrate some particular theory of the author as has been alleged by certain critics, but they form the basis on which the theory is built, and cannot, therefore, be avoided, however much they may tax the patience of the reader. The general public will also, perhaps, object to being told certain facts which hurt its sense of modesty. But the concealment of truth is the only indecorum known to science, and to keep anything secret within its cold and passionless expanses would be as prudish as to throw a cloth round a naked statue. Page 48.